And we're back after a brief break. You're watching South Texas Crossfire with your host, Attorney Joe Flores. You had just been watching from the Hector P. Garcia Foundation, his lovely daughter, Miss Garcia Akers, and her husband, Jim Akers. And there's a great event that's happening once again, January 17th, 2014 at the Omni. Get your tickets and visit Dr. Hector P. Garcia Foundation.org for more information and for an interview with him. And don't forget, he was an immigrant, and look what he did for people. And I also have some very distinguished attorneys that are coming on here, and the law firm is Rodriguez and Moretzsohn, and they are located there on Air Street here in Corpus Christi and other locations in between. Welcome, ladies. How are you? It's an honor.
Hi, good morning. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. Especially with this weather. Ooh, it's nice and cold out there, you know. And we'll probably play it in the summer, so just letting you know we're filming it with our first cold blast coming. But thank you all for being here.
Thank you. It's our
Can
honor.
you tell us a little bit about the firm and for people out there y nuestra audiencia también que hablan nuestro idioma? Estamos hablando con las abogadas que manejan inmigración aquí en el sur de Texas. So, can you tell us a little bit about the firm?
Heather and I have been practicing together since about 2010, although separately we've been practicing a lot longer than that. Heather literally grew up in an immigration household. Her father was an immigration attorney, and we jokingly say that her family pictures look like the United Nations because she has pictures of all of her family members from all over.
From different countries.
And
Yes.
but we've been practicing separately before that. I've been practicing about 17 years.
Eso es su
Nothing
bufeta de abogados hablan nuestro idioma español.
Sí, claro que sí.
Oh,
Sí,
okay,
yeah.
great. So you guys speak Spanish too.
and Portuguese.
And Portuguese.
And German and Japanese.
Fala pouco de português.
Você fala português também?
Sim,
Que bom.
também. Tudo bem. Yeah. Yeah, I do a little bit of that. So yeah, it comes in handy. So
It sure does.
so people out there, it's not just Spanish, Portuguese, and other people, German,
Right.
and
Well, in Japanese, I lived in Japan for a few years,
Oh,
and I'm from
wow.
Hawaii originally. So we have, basically, we service any individual who's living in the United States who is not a U.S. citizen. They have to integrate with the Immigration Service in some manner, and that's what we are here. We're here to serve them and find a legal path for them to stay here with permission.
well, and this question to both of you: why do you do immigration law?
Oh, it's my passion. That's where I would say.
I used to joke with my friends that it's like being in social service but with a law license. But you know, really, it's bringing families together. It's helping people realize their dreams. We really enjoy it a lot.
A lot of people, and I'm so glad you are on here, there's a lot of rhetoric going on right now about immigration, and I was listening to a distinguished professor from University of Texas saying, well, it started, I guess the biggest ruckus was the Chinese back in the 1800s with work, and then everybody kind of has a love-hate relationship with Mexico and America with labor. So, you know, 20 years ago, come on over and work, and now it's stay away, more walls and more guards and Minutemen, and so what's going? Y'all are in the trenches, and you know what's really going on. Tell us what really is going on in the state of immigration.
Okay. Well, just by way of quick background, the immigration laws are directly connected to the international socio and political situation. So if you look back when we first became a nation, we had an open-door immigration policy. The leaders at that time wanted everybody to come in, and then that lasted about 100 years. And right around the mid-1860s is when we kind of stopped and we said, well, now we have all these people in the United States, let's pick and choose who we actually want here. That lasted until right before World War II, and then we started implementing quotas. So we had so many people in the United States, and the government said, okay, from the Western Hemisphere, we're going to have a certain number of people. From the Eastern Hemisphere, we're going to have another certain group of people. So then we started to change our immigration policies because immigration worldwide had started after World War II. You saw a lot of airplanes, transportation, communication became more predominant worldwide. And then during the 1960s, we had the civil rights movement. A lot of those issues were coming up. We had a bit of an open door policy in the sense that we didn't have real strong borders. We wanted more people to come into the United States for agricultural reasons. We were still a growing country. And because of that, there was an influx of individuals, and they liked our freedoms, they liked our system of government, and so people stayed. And they raised families, and then in 1986 was really the first major immigration reform. That was IRCA, or IRA, that was IRA. IRCA. And that's when we had what was noted 3 million, quote, undocumented individuals in the United States, and President Reagan said we need to do something about this issue. So they implemented stronger border policies, stronger deportation policies, but they also gave a path to residency and citizenship. That was the agricultural, or the permanent resident agricultural reform, or residency. So that lasted until about 1996, and then there was that was IRA, another major reform, and that's when they said, well, we have more individuals in the United States. It was a give and take with the government. Congress said, okay, we will change the laws, but we're going to make it harsher for individuals who are breaking the laws. And that was really the start, in my analysis, of the problems today. In 1996, that's when the government had implemented what's called the 3 and 10-year bars. If an individual is in the United States 6 months but less than 1 year without permission, and they want to fix their paperwork, they're barred for 3 years from doing it. Now, if an individual is in the United States 1 year or longer without permission, they are barred for 10 years from fixing their paperwork.
Boy.
And let me explain what she means by the bar is if they're here, Congress says, well, if you're here without permission, you can't continue with your paperwork here. You have to go to the consulate. And a lot of people would say, well, okay,
in their home country.
Go to the consulate in your home country. But what Heather's saying is now you have to stay 10 years in your home country before you re-enter. Maybe you can get a waiver, maybe you can't. As a practical matter, if I have a spouse or a child, I'm not going to be doing that. It's too much of a risk to tear apart the family, so it's not practical. They've made a few changes to help that along a little bit, but it's still very impractical, and that's the problem. Is in 52 we had a quota system. We've had the same system since 52. Any of the changes that have happened subsequently, for the most part, have been restrictionist, and it's you have 22-year wait for a sibling wanting to come over that's being petitioned legally by their sibling. That's not practical. So we need something to be fixed.
Well, and I had a meeting with the congressman, a summit of sorts down in the valley, and I met with several congressmen, and they said the laws, the way they're set up right now, are actually encouraging people to enter illegally because you might have to be waiting half a century to come in.
That is true.
And then they say, well, do it the right way and pathway to citizenship, but the way we treat Mexicans versus Cubans versus Haitians, there's different standards.
That's correct.
And so tell us a little bit about, I guess what is affecting most of us is the Mexican and South American immigration is the one that right now is being targeted. Morris Dees has said, hate groups have shot up, and not so much against African Americans, more against Latinos. So how does, as a backdrop to that, let's look at immigration and what can attorneys do for those that are here less than legally in this country?
Okay. I think it's important to clarify a few items. First off, the way I always describe it to people, the immigration system is like climbing up a ladder. So the top level would be a U.S. citizenship status. So an individual who has the status cannot be deported, and they can work freely, and they can live abroad forever and come back and they're still U.S. citizens. One level before that is lawful permanent resident status. There are restrictions, but there's flexibility and freedom to work and travel in the United States. Level below that would be what I would classify as non-immigrant visa holders. Those are usually student visa holders, tourist visa holders. The level below that would be temporary protected status, individuals who can stay in the United States with permission, but they cannot travel. And then right below that would be a non-documented status. So there are 5 levels that I would classify to simplify the immigration concept for individuals who may not be aware of the process.
And so one of the first things we do when we meet with people who are here without permission is we look for opportunities to place them in one of the levels. One of the positive things that has come out over the past year is the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, DACA, where if a child's entered before the age of 16 and is still under the age of 31 and either is in school or has graduated from school and there's no significant criminal history, these children can apply for something similar to a temporary protected status where they have permission to work, they have permission to stay, they're safe for right now from deportation. They can't travel necessarily, although might be some provisions for that, but it's kind of you're okay for right now. So that's it's a temporary situation. That was signed by executive order by President Obama. You would think that a child that came in at age 2 that didn't have any input as to whether they were going to break the laws or not, you would think that Congress would be understanding about these children. And there's been some movement in it, but it's still something that's not a permanent, and we would hope that hopefully it will become permanent.
Well, the area that I handle is the federal criminal aspect of it, where we have a 2-year-old that came in, quote unquote, without documentation, or as they say, illegally. And then they do get a felony when they're 17 or 18, wrong place, wrong time, and then they're deported to a land where they don't speak the language. They graduated from Carroll High School, and then they're being sent to Mexico in a civil war of drugs.
Right.
Well, and we would always hope that the criminal attorneys that are dealing that, we always tell this to our clients, if you get in trouble, criminal law is a little bit different than immigration law. So what might be a good deal for a criminal attorney where they can get a deferred adjudication and probation and, a little fine, no jail time, that might not be good enough for us. Maybe we want a pretrial diversion, or maybe a different type of plea agreement. So it's very important, if someone does find themselves in that type of a problem, to make sure they tell their attorney, hey, I'm not a U.S. citizen. I mean, we've had kids that don't speak Spanish, and so why would the attorney not,
No, otherwise, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. People will not ask, or they have never been stopped before, or they've managed through the system so long, graduated high school, and have had that. And I think more and more now attorneys are starting to realize that the criminal attorneys, that they are held liable if they are pleading out these people and not
providing advisals of the immigration consequences.
So I guess for the practitioners out there, the lawyers that are watching this, is contact you guys before they plea, and then after that it's a little too late.
We've been pretty active with the criminal bar. We're just a phone call away, but as part of a criminal attorney's intake, that should be one of the questions.
Are you an American citizen, or what status?
Right, because permanent residents have different immigration deportation rules rather than somebody who has absolutely no status.
And one of the main changes that happened back in 96 is that judges used to be able to use their discretion, no matter what the situation, to determine whether someone could stay and keep their legal permanent residence. But in 96 they made several changes, and it provided statutory authority, and if you don't fall into this little box, the judge doesn't get to go to the second level and use his discretion. They'll say, I'm sorry, you don't qualify for this because you've not been here 5 years. But my wife is disabled, and I have U.S. kids, my U.S. wife, you haven't been here for whatever the period of time is. So the judges have lost a lot of the discretion, which is unfortunate, because immigration is a law of families. It's people. It's not just
civil law. Yeah. You had asked about the hate mongers, or the issues that are going on right now.
Absolutely.
I also think it's important for the public to know that there are 2 types of deportation issues that are occurring right now. I think the matter that's getting the most media attention right now are a lot of them are coming over from Central America. These are recent individuals who have recently entered the United States without permission, probably within a one day, 2 week period. So it's kind of that up until 2 weeks, the deportation or the Border Patrol has the authority to expeditiously remove these individuals unless they can show credible fear. So that's one classification of individuals. That's what the Brooks County, there's some issues of the missing individuals going through the Brooks County, DNA testing. A lot of that has been in the media recently. That's one classification of deportation issues that is going on. The other area are the individuals who have been here 10 to 15 years. They have families, they have children. Their children have grown up in the system and are U.S. citizens. This is a different classification of deportation. These individuals have more rights available to them than this group. And so that's what is going on in the media, is a lot of the recent intending immigrants, but they're not eligible for the most part for asylum because they're fleeing gang violence, and that's not been recognized in our legal system as granting asylum.
Yeah, and it's totally ludicrous because, 100,000 people or more have lost their lives in Mexico in what is a civil war, that they don't want to declare a civil war because then we might have
Open
that
the floodgates.
TPS.
amnesty.
Yes.
And so what about, I'm working on an article on human trafficking. And that's another issue where you have the T visas and things like that, which are harder than Chinese arithmetic to get and prove. Can you tell us a little bit about human trafficking, which in my opinion is almost neck and neck with drugs as far as...
We actually have had pretty good success with the T visa for the trafficking victims and U visas. We kind of put them together.
Yeah.
And the Women's Shelter does a fantastic job with their work with victims of trafficking. It is something that's also really been brought to light by Representative Hunter. He has done a phenomenal job, bringing this to the forefront.
Theo Todd.
They just had a great summit. Was it Friday?
Last Friday, November 15th. Trafficking
yeah,
summit.
I think they're going to hold another one February. So really bringing this issue to light, and it's not. Some people think it is just a smuggling in trafficking type issue. That's not what it is at all. There's work, labor. Trafficking, where you're forcing someone to work, you're forcing someone into a sex trade, and whether they're U.S. citizens or immigrants, that doesn't matter. It's all trafficking, and it doesn't mean you're moving them from one place to another. It's meaning you're coercing or you're forcing them. It's a huge problem here in Texas.
One of, I believe, the reasons this is occurring here is because they've clamped down on the Arizona border. And so we have heard this through some individuals who have been detained, that the smugglers have now, word on the street is that Texas is an easier route to get into. And so that's why all of a sudden in the last few years that media attention has been hyper-focused in this area.
I think one of the hubs, if they'll go to South Houston or now North Houston, is, they've got the buses that take people here and there, and so also ICE do a great job. I work with them all the time in these sorts of cases, but they've been under scrutiny, and also they themselves have had their own litigation saying we're not even allowed to do our job. What's going on with that you guys have heard about?
I'm not sure about that. I do know that I've had some experience working with some of the local ICE agents, and they usually I consider myself on the opposite side of ICE. I mean, I'm trying to keep them here. They're trying to, deport people. So I'm not used to working with them. I have been so impressed with their sensitivity with trafficking victims. I'm just getting off of the case. I really was impressed with their take on it, their sensitivity. Yeah.
I think to answer your question, there's confusion in the media. ICE is focused on these individuals who have come in recently. So they're within the last 2 weeks. They're focused on the drug trafficking, the alien smuggling.
Absolutely.
And that's a good thing because that helps the rest of the population live their lives freely. What the other confusion in the media is all the other individuals who have been here 10 to 15 years, and perhaps they're the ones with the families, and they get either caught up in the system or a minor traffic incident, let's say a taillight is broken, and then the police stop them, to check on the taillight, and then they ask for the papers, and they don't have paperwork that shows that they're with permission, and then that's where Border Patrol gets involved. So they're different government agencies. ICE focuses, to my understanding, primarily on the the drugs and the alien smuggling on the recent border entrance.
Right.
So it's slightly different.
And I think one of the nice things about a forum like this is in some of the media there's a misperception of people that the reason why they're here without documentation is because they haven't wanted to make the attempt to get their papers fixed. And that's just not at all true. Oh, well, they have a U.S. citizen spouse. Of course they can get their papers fixed. Heather and I, we will admit, or I will admit, that I like to play with the audience when we go up and we have a conversation. Well, how many people think that if you're married to a U.S. citizen, you have 3 U.S. kids,
You're automatic citizen.
you get to apply for your citizenship, or you get to apply for legal permanent residence? Everyone raises their hand. It's like, no, that's not what the law is. If you came in without permission and you're married to a U.S. citizen and you have 3 U.S. kids, you've been here 9 years, you pay your taxes, you have a job, you don't take any federal benefits, you have no criminal record, I can't fix it. That is the reality of where we are, and that is why we need the immigration system to be fixed.
And, families are being ripped apart. See it over and over where you have somebody who did make a mistake, and then when they try to re-enter, and they are going to try to re-enter, there's no doubt about it.
This is their life is
This is their life and their home.
Right.
And the other, I think the two, and this is me talking, not you guys, I think the two biggest lies are we don't want cheap Mexican drugs and we don't want cheap Mexican labor. That's what we want in America, and not to say anything about any federal judge, but, freedom of speech here. I will hear federal judges say, we don't want you here. And I say, wow. The irony of that statement is that's not true. Why is the person that hired them, the farmer, the person that has the poultry farm,
building
the meatpacking plant, all of that, they should be in chains right next to the person who entered illegally, who the job is there for, but they never get prosecuted. They'll get a fine and they'll complain about it, and they say, our immigration policy would change if they were in chains next to the person who entered illegally. Quiet on the set.
What do you say to that? How do you follow up with that?
That is actually in the Senate reform bill. That was one of the proposals. There were 4 components of that bill. One is to focus on the undocumented population. The second phase was to focus on the documented population. So these are individuals who are professionals who have come in with permission or are waiting for a visa. And then the third area was the employer sanctions to make E-Verify mandatory. Right now it's voluntary, but to make it mandatory as it is with the driver's license right now. They check the system to make sure an individual is documented or has legal status. And then the fourth area was agricultural reform. So that was the proposal in the Senate bill. The House has chosen not to address that bill as a complete bill, and they're attempting to dissect it, and so we still have yet to see what happens with that.
And let me ask you this, you as immigration attorneys, the reality of the situation is that when they're coming in and they get caught up in the system and they were working, they were in fact paying taxes.
Majority of them.
Sure. In the form of everything they buy at a store.
Well, they also get TIN numbers,
which are legitimate,
and they file their taxes. I mean, we have many clients that file their taxes with the federal government. They pay federal taxes.
To my right-wing friends, listen to that.
I also think it's important to clarify, again, there's 2 segments of the deportation population, as I referred to earlier. There's also the individuals who are coming in right now in this community who are professionals. They're either software engineers or they're managers, they're executives working for the oil and gas company.
Boom.
And so there's different individuals in this community who need immigration services, not just the undocumented population, but individuals, if they fall out of status for whatever reason, then they become undocumented.
One thing that we really liked, I think, about the Senate's bill is you could hear all of the different stakeholders' voices in that bill. A lot of the quotas or the professional visas that were tied to letting immigrants have work permissions was tied to the economy. If we have a very high unemployment rate, the number of visas allowed to be given drops, and vice versa. I thought that was responsible. Of course, we want more, but it was responsible, and I can appreciate that. It also allowed people who were choosing to go on the lawful path, where they're waiting in their home country, waiting to come in. It moved those figures faster. It did cut off some of the things, like a brother or sister can't apply for your brother or sister in the future, but they took those visas and put it to different categories, and it was a pretty good bill, and people are looking at it and saying, oh, that's all for the illegals. First of all, I don't think it's illegal to want a better life. I don't think that should be called illegal. So we always refer to it as undocumented workers. But that bill was so much more than that. There was one component that dealt with it. I mean, there are 12 million people. I think everyone agrees they're not going home. Both sides of that argument, they agree they're not going home. So what is better for the U.S. citizen? It's better for me if I get in a car accident to have the person who hit me to have a driver's license, to have insurance, and that is better for me. It's better for me to be able to track people through a driver's license to find out where the child support people are and the criminals and all that. That is better for me. And in fact, 3 states are starting to issue licenses to undocumented workers. I mean, I think the trend is trying to move in the direction of supporting immigration reform. California is going to start issuing driver's licenses. I think Illinois, and I want to say D.C. too. I'm not quite sure on D.C. If Mr. Facebook is getting involved in politics and coming to D.C. and talking about
the importance of immigration
we have
reform.
to do something.
Well, and let me ask you this. More walls, a fence, does that work?
Well, they qualify for H-2B visas.
but really, building multi-million-dollar fences, is that, and cameras, and all due respect, more ICE agents, is that going to stop people from coming in?
It's hard to predict the future, but if we can look to the past, look at prohibition. When they clamped down on alcohol, made it illegal, we had everything pop up left and right in terms of mafias. That's what's going on now.
It works to a degree. I think I won't be popular for saying that, but in Arizona, when they built the fences and secured it, it probably dropped Arizona's rate, but it moved it over into Texas, and I think there are so many miles of fence that would be required. I think it's impractical. I think there are things already in place that we can toughen up on. For example, people who are hiring undocumented people. There's laws in place, sanctions that are able to be imposed that aren't being imposed. So, why not start there? Look at the reason why people are coming in.
People are here not only for the jobs, but for the freedom. A lot of countries, if you go out into the street, Mexico's an example, a lot of the Central American companies, you don't know if you're going to come back.
Right.
A lot of people say that. And so we have the freedom, we have a justice system, we have respect, the government respects the people. So people are going to come to continue to come here. And so then what we need to address is, while they're here and once they're here, what do we do? Do we give people a status to allow individuals to pay taxes and contribute to our economy? Or do we kind of take a blind eye and pretend they're not there? Do we integrate them into the system? Another area of the immigration reform bill is a point system. So they've allowed, or they have proposed, much like Canada and Australia, individuals to earn their path to permanent resident status and citizenship through education, through family ties, through opening businesses. So incentives to put people on the right path. So I think as a government and as a society, we need to look at the system differently. What's in place now is antiquated. We don't live in the cold world anymore.
And I know that while Heather and I might not rally around higher security measures, because I think what we have in place is adequate in many ways, if that's what it takes in order to help the other segment, you have to give and take. You can't make this a black and white issue. You can't have both sides saying it's either my way or the highway.
Right.
You have to come together. And the Senate bill, again, if you look at that closely, and it's 800 77 pages. We looked at it closely. You know, there's parts we like, there's parts we don't like, but it came together and provided a solution.
And in all fairness, you know, most of the criminal federal attorney, you know, that we handle, these are guys that have already had felonies. These are people that have committed crimes, and so when the federal judges sentence them and say, we don't want you here, they really mean it. And I think that anybody, I think the other 14 million undocumented that are law-abiding, other than living in the shadows, don't want them there either, because they're the bad guys that have tried to come in. And when they do come in, you know, I kind of talk to them and say, well, it's kind of your own fault you're getting deported. If you had stayed in the shadows, played it cool, maybe you'd have a chance at trying to get a pathway to citizenship. But while you were here, you beat your wife 10 times, you got 5 DWIs, and you got busted with cocaine. Chances of you getting citizenship are zip. So, you know, that's what we deal with.
We would treat a U.S. citizen the same. I mean, these are laws that...
Except they wouldn't get deported.
Right. They would be in prison for 20 years, right?
Yeah. Well, and the thing is that the incarceration, it doesn't make sense that when we get them and they do 5 years here and we pay for them, and then when they enter, the way the sentencing guidelines work, then they're going to get possibly another 5 years. So just for entering, they get the double sentence. And I guess it's up to about 80,000 now to house and feed them in federal prison. And that's if they're young and they're healthy. So I think that we've got to look at this differently. But what about the 14 million plus living in the shadows that are listening to Jorge Ramos more than Diane Sawyer every night? What do we do with them that are already here?
I just think that really everyone needs to continually reach out to the representatives, both state and the federal, the congressmen and the representatives, and voice support. I just think we're at a critical point right now, and I think when you talk to people in their own little bubble, everyone agrees something needs to be done, and I feel that if Senate can come together and provide a good solution, it's a little more challenging with the House, I know, but I just don't think we should give up. And in fact, you know, even Boehner yesterday was saying it's not dead, we still can move forward.
I guess with everything going on, the Syria issue, everything else, it was almost like immigration. Everybody dropped it, and then with the Affordable Care Act, it became like the second or third issue to look at, and we can't forget about it.
Right, it's always what happens. So there's always going to be 1, 2, 3 other issues going on. That's just life.
It's just
politics.
You know, that's the capital. That's D.C. That's the Beltway.
I believe there will be a reform. Historically, there's every 10, 15 years there's a major reform. And so it depends where one would consider the last reform to have ended. I consider it to have ended in 2001 because that was the cutoff date when people who had come in without permission could have fixed their paperwork. And so if you look at 2001 as the cutoff date, we're at 2013, we're really right in the middle of a potential reform. But historically, there's always reform because it's directly tied with the people who are in power and the socioeconomic changes. And we're really due for something.
Y damas y caballeros que están escuchando aquí este mensaje también en el radio, what is the number to call? ¿Qué es el número de llamar su oficina?
883-8900.
That's easy to remember. 883-8900. You heard it here first. 883-8900.
Correct.
And 883-8900. And that's número de área es 361. And what about a website? I know everybody now has the phones there they can go to. And we're going to load this up on YouTube, this interview, and hopefully help people there. But what's your website?
It's DeborahRodriguez.com.
And DeborahRodriguez.com is the other way to get a hold of them. We've got a few minutes left. Closing arguments for why, and Catholic Charities, like we talked about, does a sensational job, but there was a misunderstanding out there. Catholic Charities has lawyers that'll do the basics. Now, there are complicated cases, like with everything, you know, Even a haircut is dangerous. You know, so
Now you're talking my language.
yeah, we can't do legal Zoom on every immigration cookie cutter.
And they don't do deportation defense, at least the Catholic Charities here in Corpus Christi.
And we are so fortunate to have a good Catholic Charities here. We have
Very good.
We have
Yes.
Kim Sager and we have Carrie Thompson that do a fantastic job. They work with a low income and a high risk population. They do a great job. And when they get to a point, either it's a deportation or maybe it's an employment based case or a very, very complicated family base, they'll call us. And so it's kind of, you know, they service the population that so needs them, and we're very fortunate to have them.
I encourage everybody to look and find somebody that they're comfortable with, who's knowledgeable. Knowledge is power.
That's
and
right.
the more knowledge an individual has, the more rights they have, and then they know what rights they can go forward on.
And second opinions are not a bad thing.
Not a bad thing at all.
If you know, if you come to us and we tell you we can't help, we'll tell you why we can't help. And I even write down the statute of law sometimes, and they'll say, "Well, yeah, I think I'm going to go somewhere else." Like, great, here's the statute. Have them explain why they can get around that. We often will get these people coming back because they've gone ahead against advice and applied for a benefit they aren't
Qualify.
entitled to. They end up in deportation proceedings, and now it's a different case. So you have to be very careful that you qualify for the benefit that you are applying for.
Our main goal is to help people. We want people to live here peacefully and have the legal path to do so.
Well, I couldn't be honored more to have somebody on, finally, that handles immigration. It's so hard to find attorneys that will do immigration. Remember that number, 883-8900, 883-8900. If you're watching this, and just remember, here on Lopez Broadcasting, and this does not constitute legal advice. This is just a topic on immigration, but if you need a consult, call the law offices of
Rodriguez and Moretzsohn.
Rodriguez and Moretzsohn. There you go. And also multilingual. So not just Spanish. Falam Português também. So, and many other languages. So we've been here. Ladies, it's been an honor to have you on.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And
It's a pleasure.
finally, we have somebody, immigration, a resource here in town that people can call. Y si tienen preguntas, no hay ninguna pregunta que es necia. No hay ninguna pregunta que no pueden llamar a estas abogadas. 883-8900. We're out of time. Thank you all, and God bless.